From quick snacks to late-night essentials, convenience stores have been a lifeline for millions. But in 2025, the tides are shifting fast. Rising rents, inflation, competition from bigger retailers, and changes in consumer behavior are forcing even the most familiar names to shut their doors. Some are hanging by a thread, others have already faded into memory. Here are the 10 convenience store chains that are going out of business in 2025. 1. Giant. Giant Food wasn't just another grocery store when it first opened its doors back in 1936. Founded by Nehemiah Meir N.M. Cohen, a rabbi who had emigrated to America, and Samuel Lehrman in Washington, D.C., Giant Food Shopping Center opened as Washington's first mass merchandise supermarket. It was the middle of the Great Depression, people were struggling to make ends meet, and suddenly this bright, spacious store appeared offering something nobody had seen before: one-stop shopping with self-service. Coupled with its lower prices, these features kept the store busy and crowded from its opening days. The place was always packed with families wheeling their carts through wide aisles, kids begging their parents for candy at the checkout, and neighbors bumping into each other near the produce section where they would catch up on the latest neighborhood gossip. Those early Giant stores were like community centers wrapped up in a grocery store. By 1939, Giant had expanded to 3 stores. Giant's 4th store had a brick and glass facade that spelled out its name and was lighted at night. An innovation at the time. Can you imagine how exciting it must have been to see your local grocery store all lit up at night? It was probably the coolest thing in town. Families would make their weekly shopping trips into little adventures, with everyone piling into the car on Saturday mornings. The kids would race ahead to grab a cart while Mom pulled out her carefully written shopping list and Dad complained about the parking situation. Inside, the butcher knew everyone by name, the produce manager would save the best tomatoes for his regular customers, and the checkout ladies would ask about your sick aunt or congratulate you on your kid's graduation. It was more than shopping, it was a social hour. Throughout the 1980s, Giant continued to grow. The late 1980s through mid-1990s saw a complete modernization of Giant and Martin's stores as remodels, expansions, and interior upgrades were completed in virtually every store within the chain. In addition, many new customer conveniences were added, including in-store banks, pharmacies. Giant became the place where you could cash your paycheck, pick up your prescription, grab groceries for the week, and maybe even buy a birthday card for your cousin's party later. But now, with the company owned by Netherlands-based Ahold Delhaize shutting down that massive 65,000 square foot store in Ashburn, Virginia after 19 years, it feels like watching an old friend pack up and leave town. The company says other nearby Giants can handle the customers, but anyone who has shopped at their favorite grocery store knows it's never quite the same when you have to drive somewhere else for your weekly routine. 2. Albertsons. Back in 1939, when Joe Albertson decided to open his first store in Boise, Idaho, he probably never imagined his little grocery shop would grow into one of America's biggest supermarket chains. Joe Albertson, with partners L.S. Skaggs and Tom Cuthbert, opens his first one-stop shopping market called Albertsons Food Center in Boise, Idaho. In 1945, Albertsons Corporation was formed with 6 state-of-the-art supermarkets and sales approaching $3 million. Albertsons grew with the times and came of age in the post-war years. Those post-war years were when Albertsons really became part of American life. Imagine those gleaming new stores with their wide aisles and modern refrigeration systems. They were like glimpses into the future for shoppers who were used to small corner markets and butcher shops scattered all over town. Albertsons stores became gathering spots for entire communities. Friday evenings, the parking lots would fill up with families doing their weekly shopping, teenagers hanging out by the shopping carts hoping to run into their crushes, and elderly couples taking their time walking through every aisle because, honestly, where else did they have to be? The deli counter was always busy with people ordering sliced turkey and chatting with the workers who remembered exactly how thick Mrs. Johnson liked her ham and that Mr. Peterson always wanted his cheese cut extra thin. Kids would beg their parents to let them ride in the shopping cart, and parents would cave because, hey, it kept them quiet for at least 10 minutes. The checkout lines were where you'd catch up with neighbors you hadn't seen all week, complain about the weather, and compare notes on whose kids were driving them crazy. With 2,253 stores as of the third quarter of fiscal year 2020 and 270,000 employees as of fiscal year 2019, the company is the second largest supermarket chain in North America after Kroger. But size doesn't always protect you from trouble, and Albertsons found that out the hard way when their planned merger with Kroger fell apart at the end of 2024. The whole thing turned into a messy legal battle with both companies pointing fingers at each other, and now Albertsons is talking about closing stores to clean up their real estate portfolio. The first to go was the Roseburg, Oregon location in February 2025, with 87 employees getting the bad news that their workplace was shutting down. It's tough to think about all those regular customers who will have to find somewhere new to buy their groceries, and all those employees who have been part of their community's daily routine for years. 3. Lunds and Byerly's. Lunds and Byerly's was never your average grocery store. It was the fancy one where you would go when you wanted to impress dinner guests or treat yourself to something special. With nearly 30 locations across the Twin Cities, it carved out a niche as the upscale option for shoppers who wanted organic vegetables that actually looked perfect, imported cheeses you couldn't pronounce, and wine selections that made you feel sophisticated even if you were just buying a bottle to go with your frozen pizza. The downtown St. Paul location had been serving customers for more than 10 years, becoming a go-to spot for downtown workers grabbing lunch, urban dwellers doing their weekly shopping without having to drive to the suburbs, and anyone who wanted to feel a little fancy while picking up groceries. The store attracted a certain crowd: young professionals who appreciated the convenience of walking to get groceries, food enthusiasts who loved discovering new products they'd never heard of, and people who figured life was too short to settle for mediocre produce. You would see the same faces week after week: the woman who always bought fresh flowers for her apartment, the guy who spent 20 minutes reading every label in the organic section, couples arguing quietly about whether they really needed to spend $12 on artisanal jam. The prepared food section was always busy with people who wanted something that looked homemade, but didn't have time to actually make it themselves. Even the shopping carts felt fancier somehow, gliding smoothly through aisles that never seemed too crowded or too messy. But fancy doesn't protect you from real-world problems, and Lunds and Byerly's found that out when everything seemed to go wrong at once. A fire in 2022 was just the beginning. Then came harassment and shoplifting that made it hard to keep staff, and the post-COVID downtown area just wasn't bringing in the foot traffic anymore. When they announced the March closure, it wasn't just about losing a grocery store. It was about losing a piece of what made downtown St. Paul feel like a real neighborhood. City Council member Rebecca Noker promised to work on bringing a new grocery store to replace it, making sure locals could still get everything they needed to make their hometown Juicy Lucy cheeseburgers. But anyone who has ever had a favorite store close knows it's never quite the same when someone new moves in. 4. Shaw's. Shaw's has been a New England fixture for so long that it's hard to imagine the region without those familiar red and white signs dotting the landscape. With 129 stores spread across Maine, Massachusetts, New Hampshire, Rhode Island, and Vermont, Shaw's became as much a part of New England culture as autumn leaves and clam chowder. The chain attracted a loyal following of shoppers who appreciated the regional feel. These weren't massive big-box stores, but comfortable neighborhood markets where you could find both the basics and some local specialties. Regular customers developed relationships with the staff, knew which cashier was fastest during the morning rush, and had strong opinions about which location had the best produce section. The Shaw's crowd was distinctly New England, practical people who appreciated good value but weren't looking for anything too fancy. You would find retired couples taking their time in the aisles, comparing prices and using coupons they had carefully clipped from the Sunday paper. Working parents would rush in after soccer practice to grab ingredients for dinner, and college students would stock up on ramen noodles and whatever was on sale. The stores had that comfortable, lived-in feeling that made shopping feel less like a chore and more like part of your weekly routine. During blizzards, Shaw's parking lots would be packed with people stocking up on bread, milk, and whatever else they thought they might need to wait out the storm. But even beloved regional chains aren't immune to economic pressures, and Shaw's parent company Albertsons announced in March that 2 locations were closing, one in Concord, New Hampshire, and another in Gloucester, Massachusetts. Like good neighbors, the company offered to transfer interested employees to other locations in each city, showing the kind of courtesy that customers had come to expect from Shaw's. The same consideration you'd show when following proper conveyor belt etiquette at checkout. A company spokesperson called it a tough decision while promising to keep focusing on providing the products and services customers valued most. It's the kind of careful, polite language that somehow makes bad news sound a little less harsh, but doesn't change the fact that two communities are losing their neighborhood grocery stores. 5. Amazon Fresh. Amazon Fresh was supposed to be the future of grocery shopping. Sleek, high-tech stores where you could just grab what you needed and walk out without waiting in line, thanks to something called Just Walk Out technology. It sounded like science fiction made real, and for a while it felt like we were living in the future. The early Amazon Fresh stores attracted curious shoppers who wanted to experience this new way of buying groceries, tech enthusiasts who got excited about sensors and cameras tracking their every move, and busy people who loved the idea of cutting their shopping time in half. The stores had a modern, almost futuristic feel with clean lines, bright lighting, and technology everywhere you looked. The Amazon Fresh experience was unlike anything traditional grocery shoppers were used to. Instead of the familiar chaos of regular supermarkets, crying babies, long checkout lines, and that one cart with the wobbly wheel, Amazon Fresh felt calm and organized. Customers would scan a QR code to enter, pick up their items while cameras and sensors tracked everything, and then just walk out while the technology automatically charged their accounts. It attracted a specific type of shopper: early adopters who loved trying new technology, busy professionals who valued efficiency over everything else, and people who enjoyed feeling like they were part of some grand experiment in retail innovation. The stores became conversation starters. Everyone had an opinion about whether this was brilliant or creepy, convenient or impersonal. But even the world's largest e-retailer couldn't make every experiment work, and Amazon proved that bold innovation doesn't always guarantee success. After scrapping the Just Walk Out technology from both Fresh and Whole Foods markets, Amazon announced that 2 Fresh locations were closing: the Thousand Oaks, California store in April, and the Manassas, Virginia location in March, affecting more than 150 employees combined. Both stores had been open for less than 3 years, barely enough time to build the kind of customer loyalty that traditional grocery stores rely on. While Amazon shifted to smart shopping carts and continued opening new locations like the Silver Spring, Maryland store in March, the closures served as a reminder that even tech giants have to deal with the same basic retail challenges as everyone else: attracting customers, making money, and figuring out what people actually want from their grocery shopping experience. 6. Piggly Wiggly. Piggly Wiggly opened its first store on this day in 1916 in Memphis, Tennessee, and today the chain has more than 530 stores across 17 states. But back when Clarence Saunders first came up with this crazy idea, nobody knew what to make of it. And picture this: it's 1916, and most people are used to walking into a store and telling the clerk what they want while standing around waiting for someone else to gather their groceries for them. Then along comes Saunders with this wild concept where customers could actually walk around the store themselves, pick up their own stuff, and carry it to the front in a basket. This was a completely new concept, and it caught on like wildfire. By 1922, there were 1,200 Piggly Wiggly stores across the country. The name itself was bizarre enough to get people talking, though Saunders never really explained why he chose Piggly Wiggly. Maybe he just liked the sound of it, or maybe he figured if you're going to revolutionize grocery shopping, you might as well give it a memorable name that nobody could forget. The early Piggly Wiggly stores were like nothing anyone had ever seen before, with turnstiles at the entrance like you were going to a baseball game, and aisles laid out in a specific pattern that forced customers to walk past every single product in the store. It was genius, really. Instead of just buying what you came for, you would end up discovering things you didn't even know you wanted. Families would make their weekly Piggly Wiggly trips into little adventures, with kids running ahead to grab a basket, while parents marveled at being able to touch and examine products before buying them. The stores became gathering places where neighbors would bump into each other in the cereal aisle and end up chatting for 20 minutes about whose tomatoes were growing better this year. Piggly Wiggly's introduction of self-service grocery shopping revolutionized the grocery industry, and many of the conveniences and services that American shoppers now enjoy were brought to them first by Piggly Wiggly. But even revolutionary stores that changed everything can't escape modern economic pressures, and longtime customers in Alabama and South Carolina are having to say goodbye to their beloved Piggly Wigglies after decades of community service. The Cherry Valley Shopping Center location in Alabama had been serving customers since the 1980s until its January 2025 closure, while the Columbia, South Carolina store had earned the affectionate nickname Social Pig after 50 years of operation because customers always ran into people they knew while shopping there, turning grocery runs into impromptu social hours where you would catch up on neighborhood gossip between the produce section and the checkout line. 7. Tom's Market. Austin, Texas has always prided itself on being weird, and Tom's Market fit right into that quirky spirit for nearly 20 years before announcing its April closure of all 3 locations. This wasn't your typical big box grocery chain. Tom's Market was the kind of neighborhood store that felt more like shopping at a friend's house, where the owner knew your name and probably remembered what kind of beer you bought last week. The stores attracted a distinctly Austin crowd: musicians who shopped between gigs, tech workers who appreciated the convenience of grabbing lunch without fighting downtown traffic, food enthusiasts who loved discovering local products they couldn't find anywhere else, and longtime residents who remembered when that part of town was completely different. Owner Bill Tom had started with a simple idea of creating neighborhood markets that served their communities, and somehow that simple concept blossomed into something that became part of Austin's local fabric. The customers were the kind of people who cared about supporting local businesses, who would chat with cashiers about weekend plans, and who probably had strong opinions about which breakfast tacos were worth waiting in line for. You would see the same faces week after week: the woman who always bought fresh flowers for her apartment, the guy who spent forever reading labels in the organic section, couples debating whether they really needed another bottle of local hot sauce. The prepared food section was always busy with people who wanted something that looked homemade but didn't have time to actually cook. And the stores had that comfortable neighborhood feel where nobody was in a huge hurry and everyone seemed to know each other. What made Tom's different was how it felt like part of the community rather than just a place to buy groceries. It was the kind of store where you might run into your neighbor and end up discussing the latest city council meeting or comparing notes about which food trucks were worth trying. But even beloved neighborhood institutions sometimes have to close, and Bill Tom made it clear in his farewell statement that the brand was riding off into the sunset after 2 decades of serving the Texas capital. At least Austin Select Market stepped in to acquire all 3 lease locations, so customers won't have to travel far to find their weekly groceries, though anyone who has ever shopped at a favorite local store knows it's never quite the same when new management takes over, even if they promise to keep the same community spirit alive. 8. Grocery Outlet. Grocery Outlet has always been the store for people who love a good bargain hunt, attracting customers who get genuinely excited about finding name-brand products at discount prices, and who don't mind that the selection changes from week to week depending on what deals the company could negotiate. The California-based discount chain built its reputation on the thrill of discovery. You never knew if you would find that expensive olive oil you had been wanting to try, or organic pasta sauce that usually costs twice as much somewhere else, or some random specialty item that you had never heard of but decided to try because the price was too good to pass up. Regular customers developed a kind of treasure hunting mentality, stopping by frequently because if you saw something good, you had to grab it right away since it might not be there next week. The stores attracted practical shoppers who appreciated saving money without sacrificing quality, food adventurers who enjoyed trying new products they'd discovered by accident, and families who needed to stretch their grocery budgets but still wanted to eat well. The aisles were always busy with people examining labels, comparing prices in their heads, and loading up their carts with items they hadn't planned to buy but couldn't resist at those prices. You would see customers with that satisfied look of people who knew they were getting a good deal, chatting with each other about their finds and sharing tips about which products were worth trying. But 2024 was a rough year for Grocery Outlet, with their CEO abandoning ship in late 2024 as the company struggled to figure out its direction, leaving everything in chaos until Jason Potter took over in January 2025 with plans to restructure the whole operation. Potter, who came from the fresh market, immediately started making big changes, canceling 23 leases for stores that hadn't even opened yet because they were deemed suboptimal locations, and scrapping expensive warehouse projects that were draining resources. Despite all the cuts and changes, the company still planned to open between 33 and 35 new stores during 2025, with Potter talking about the tremendous growth opportunity and reaching the chain's full potential, the kind of optimistic business speak that sounds promising but doesn't change the fact that longtime customers are watching their favorite bargain hunting destination go through some serious growing pains while trying to figure out what it wants to be when it grows up. 9. Kroger. Kroger has been America's grocery giant for so long that it's hard to imagine shopping without seeing those familiar red and blue signs, but even the biggest chains aren't immune to trouble, especially when multi-billion-dollar merger deals fall apart and turn into nasty legal battles. The company had been one of the most reliable places to buy seafood, with knowledgeable staff behind the counter who could tell you which fish was freshest and how to cook it, attracting customers who trusted Kroger's quality and selection for their special dinners and weekend cooking projects. Regular shoppers developed relationships with their local Kroger stores. They knew which cashier was fastest during the morning rush, which day the fresh bread arrived, and exactly where to find their favorite products without having to wander around the entire store. The crowds were as diverse as America itself. Busy parents grabbing ingredients for dinner after work, elderly couples taking their time with their weekly shopping while catching up with store employees who remembered their names, college students stocking up on ramen and whatever was on sale, and food enthusiasts who appreciated Kroger's selection of both everyday staples and specialty items. The stores became part of people's routines in that comfortable, predictable way that makes grocery shopping feel less like a chore and more like just another part of life. You would see the same faces week after week, and everyone had their preferred shopping times to avoid the crowds. Early morning for the serious shoppers, late evening for the people getting off work, Sunday afternoons for families making it a group activity. But Kroger's failed merger with Albertsons left both companies dealing with legal headaches and pointing fingers at each other, with Kroger claiming that Albertsons had been secretly working against the merger while secretly developing a Plan B for when the deal fell through. Meanwhile, Kroger announced closures of stores in Texas locations in Dickinson and the Woodlands in May and June, though they stayed quiet about the specific reasons, and they were more transparent about closing their Nashville, Tennessee location in January when the Belmead Plaza Shopping Center got new owners in 2023. As always, Kroger offered affected employees the chance to transfer to other locations, showing the kind of consideration for workers that customers had come to expect. But closure announcements always leave communities wondering where they will do their weekly shopping and whether the replacement store will have the same familiar feel that made grocery runs comfortable rather than stressful. 10. Winn-Dixie. Winn-Dixie has been serving communities throughout 5 southeastern states: Alabama, Florida, Georgia, Louisiana, and Mississippi. Since 1925, growing from a small operation into one of the region's most recognizable grocery chains, and for generations of Southern families, shopping at Winn-Dixie was as much a part of life as sweet tea and summer thunderstorms. The stores attracted a distinctly Southern crowd who appreciated the chain's understanding of regional tastes. They knew how to stock the right brands of grits, carried the hot sauce locals preferred, and understood that customer service meant taking time to chat rather than rushing people through the checkout line. With almost a century of history, Winn-Dixie won a place in popular culture and became Florida's first industrial corporation and retail chain to be listed on the stock exchange. But more importantly, it became part of the fabric of Southern communities where shopping was as much about seeing your neighbors as it was about buying groceries. Regular customers developed deep loyalty to their local Winn-Dixie, knowing which cashiers had been there for decades, which department managers would order special items if you asked nicely, and exactly when the fresh seafood arrived each week. The stores were gathering places where you would run into your kid's teacher in the cereal aisle, your coworker by the deli counter, and your elderly neighbor who always seemed to need help reaching something on a high shelf. Families would make their weekly Winn-Dixie trips into social events, with kids begging for treats while parents caught up with friends they would bump into between the produce section and the pharmacy. The aisles were always filled with the comfortable chatter of people who'd known each other for years, discussing everything from church potluck recipes to high school football scores, creating that warm community atmosphere that made grocery shopping feel like visiting with family. But even beloved regional institutions can't escape the changing retail landscape, and Aldi announced in August 2023 that it had entered into a definitive agreement to acquire Winn-Dixie and Harvey supermarkets, including approximately 400 locations, with some possibly being converted to the Aldi brand. The German multinational company completed the acquisition as part of major changes in 2024, immediately beginning a conversion process that involved closing locations under the Winn-Dixie banner before reopening them as Aldi stores, while other Florida locations went through the surreal process of auctioning off equipment to facilitate the changeover. Not all closures were part of the conversion plan, though. 4 Alabama locations were scheduled to close in spring 2025 with no plans to reopen, leaving longtime customers to find new places for their weekly shopping and wondering if any new store could ever replicate the comfortable, neighborly atmosphere that made Winn-Dixie feel like more than just a place to buy groceries, but rather a cornerstone of community life where shopping was always about more than just the items in your cart. Which of these stores will you miss the most? Let us know in the comments, and don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit the bell for more updates like this.